The Crystal Keepers, Chapter 7. The Frozen Forest. Mamie didn't move right away. She just stayed right where she landed and tried to breathe. Pain lanced up her spine as the silence took hold. She was sucking and blowing breath to reclaim air. When she finally possessed the ability, Mamie thought about all that had just happened, all she had just lost. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to die. She was safe, she had escaped, and now Daniel was gone. She leaned up from the floor and slid herself back to the cave wall. She looked down at the crystal in her hands and saw that her skin was covered in a thin veil of blood. Her sleeves were soaked. The river hadn't been able to wash it away. It wasn't her blood, it was Daniel's. Mamie closed her eyes and crossed her arms against her chest. She shivered, thinking of what was likely to happen now. With Daniel so wounded, he didn't have a chance to fight those soldiers. He would face those men completely by himself. All because of what I am. No, Mamie said aloud as she pressed herself up the wall to stand. She looked around the darkness, noticing thin streams of cheese-colored light pouring in from holes in the rocks above. She had to keep going. She had to find shelter, for herself, for the crystal, and then she could return when it was safe. That's what Daniel would want. He had asked that of her before she left. In the back part of the room was a staircase carved directly into the stone. Mamie approached and climbed the first step. Leaning into the wall to be sure she wouldn't fall, Mamie followed the stairs as they circled themselves in a wide pattern, rising through rocks in a tight passage of hollow stone. Eventually it stopped with a long tunnel that didn't go on. A rough bulging wall was placed directly into her path. There was no other way to go, no turns, no twists, no stairs. Mamie reached out and pressed Mikhail's crystal against the surface of the wall like before, scraping it to life with a steady stream of sparks. She leaned against her arm and pushed. There was the possibility that it was like the first door, but it wasn't like the first door. It was different. The crystal and Mamie's arm melted into the rocks like the wall had turned to melted butter, and then she fell through like nothing was there. A hot tingle passed over her body like a giant's breath. When her vision undarkened, Mamie's eyes met a powder-white pine forest covered head to toe with snow. She came down hard and hit arm first against ice, scraping down crusty shards until the skin on her forearms felt like it was peeling itself from her bones. Mamie screamed and rolled to her back. She pulled down both sleeves to get a better look at the damage. The bottom of her arms were already turning purple, while bloodied scraps of skin fluttered around like flags in the wind. She released a groan. The pain grew fiercer until the skin stung and throbbed like a red-hot iron was being stuck into her flesh. Mamie felt her pulse growing faster as every muscle in her body tensed and strained with new adrenaline. She thought it was almost what she needed, something to wake her up, to fight off the fatigue. It was like she was in a trance, like someone else was taking these steps for her. A bright yellow moon hovering beneath twinkling stars occupied the night sky. It seemed too small, Mamie thought. It wasn't the moon she recognized from home, but it was beautiful. Beautiful and different enough to make her realize that she truly was someplace else. Daniel had been right. The door had taken her to a different universe. Mamie pressed into the snow to push herself back up. She dusted powder off her robe, shivering as the wind touched her skin, freezing a layer of ghostly white across the chest of the fabric. Her toes were quickly going numb. She reached down to wipe frost off her chest, but it was quickly replaced with more. That's not good. Mamie stumbled through darkness and tall trees. She looked at the rocks where she had come through and saw a high cliff extending above her like a stone wall, reaching out in both directions. There was no door nestled into the rocks, no sight of a mountain rising above the village, no soldiers giving pursuit. The wind was the only thing she could hear. Mamie turned to the trees, cupped her hands around her mouth, and screamed, "Hello?" Then listened in growing horror as her voice died away to silence. Mamie felt colder than ever before. What if she was alone? She had no idea where this door had taken her. She was wounded, exhausted, and desperately needed rest. She had no other choice but to go on. Mamie moved towards the wall and followed the cliff into darkness. She could see a reflection of yellow color on long fields of white, broken by spears of dead and hidden foliage from below, but nothing else. A veil of blue glow projected by her lone burning eyes lit the way, and she saw nothing to suggest anyone had set foot in this place in a very long time. It was a dead and frozen world. It didn't matter, Mamie knew. She couldn't go back to Talmoria. Maybe in a few days, or a few months, or a few years, but not now. For now she had to go on. She had to find some place safe to stay for the night. With her right arm leaning against the rough rock wall like a steady shoulder to lean on, Mamie walked through the darkened forest. It was all she could do to keep hope. End of chapter.